Greetings, runners. My name is Bife here. That one sounds a little bit interesting, but we'll get used to it, I'm sure. After almost a week's worth of compiling secrets, decoding strange messages, and working as a community, Marathon fans finally managed to crack another of Bungie's ARGs, and unlocked the Marathon Save the Date trailer. Whilst it was totally a community effort with thousands of players working in tandem by the end of it, I think it'd be fair to say that there were many leading voices who were streaming the progress of the ARG on Twitch and directing people. And with that in mind, congratulations to a bunch of those people. Mr. Ruffle Waffles, Astacross, Scarrow, CB Grey, Bog on My Dog, Activy, Fallout, and many others. Well done, you cracked the codes, you broke forth the entire secret, and you brought us a trailer. And that's not to say that they were the only ones who did anything either. They may have been the ones streaming on Twitch, but there was an entire active Marathon Discord dedicated to solving this ARG. And, well, all the different bits of the puzzle came from all sorts of different places. Many different people were responsible for solving this large series of riddles. Seriously, this was a puzzle. From combining barcodes on in-universe adverts, to console commands within the back end of an in-universe website, to combining literal puzzle pieces at the very end of it, everything led back to an array of Traxxas satellites that had been manually aligned by users by the end of the ARG. All of this done within a website, all of it done with the assistance of Discord and Twitter, and all sorts of other nonsense. Upon the correct alignment, and in moments where the community made progress, new parts to the Traxxas site would unlock. And on Twitter, both Marathon the Game and the ARG Twitter account WeAreMida were giving new clues as time went on. It featured propaganda art with snakes and satellites, and sometimes there was some humour too, from the Tom is not Mida incident all the way to them reminding Astacross to stay on topic and remain in Tau Ceti, and that this was nothing to do with Destiny. In the end, it led to one final alignment of satellites, which then received a transmission from what I have to presume was Tau Ceti, and this was what contained the Marathon Save the Date trailer. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned from the ARG lore-wise, and we'll also go over the trailer to see what's going on. I'll also be breaking down the exact progression of what happened in the ARG, and whilst I don't promise the most in-depth breakdown, I will give it in the context of the lore, and I'll try and tell as concrete a story as I can. So, before we start, I just wanted to go ahead and give a thank you to the emerging Marathon community for solving the ARG, and in particular, whoever made the document writing up the ARG steps. I want to credit you, but I can't find your name anywhere on it. If it was a community effort, then kudos to the entire Marathon community Discord for creating it, but if it can be attributed to any single person or a group of individuals, please let me know somehow, probably in the comments. I'll update it in the description as soon as I find out, but the document itself was instrumental for my own understanding of the story bits that I missed, and I wanted to credit you, but unless I'm literally blind and just can't see it somehow, yeah, there is no individual name on the document. Anyway, if we're going to talk about how all of this really began, it starts across social media, as an old Twitter account from Marathon's previous ARG reactivated. This was the @we_r_mida Twitter account, and it began posting cryptic messages along with images. Assembling these images together would form a close approximation of their logo, and across the many tweets they made, a message was featured. They thought we were gone, they were wrong. They silenced us, truth persists. Beyond their walls, behind their backs, beneath their noticed. We have seen, we will reveal. When all the images were assembled and the community's interest had been piqued, about an hour later, the adventure really began. Marathon's main Twitter account started tweeting things out, including a strange video feed that was related to the ARG. At the same time, the press site and a bunch of other places were also updated with all sorts of details and strange bits and pieces that fitted into the same kind of visual design of what had been posted on Twitter. And as if this wasn't enough of a clue, other sites from the previous Marathon ARG were reactivated as well. The Sekiguchi, UESC, Traxxas, and Mida websites were all brought back online. The MIDA website in particular has always been a bit of a malleable thing, and it was where things started to get really pertinent. The MIDA website is hearoursilence.com, and it was changed significantly. It had just a single link on it, and it brought us to 1.voice.many.hearoursilence.com, an extension of the original MIDA website. Through this link, the puzzle started to develop, and people were encouraged to log in and start streaming the ARG to their audiences on Twitch. The message at that site read, "OBS breaks their chains. Interact, log in, live. The system fears when many become one. MIDA is watching. MIDA is rising." Our role in this ARG was starting to become clear with this message. We would essentially be cast as MIDA operatives, working to hack and bypass the powers that be to accomplish the greater goals of MIDA. If you were a streamer such as Milo, Bog, Scarrow, Fallout, or Cross, you'd have a crucial role to play in this, as you would start to decode a decryption key. The speed of decryption was tied to the viewership of the Marathon Twitch category, so the more people watching and therefore participating in the ARG, the faster it would decrypt. From the in-universe lore perspective, this would be MIDA's flood of willing agents looking to destabilize the powers of the UESC and expose something that had been hidden from us. Doing this would be done with the help of MIDA's infiltrators within the UESC and other organizations. But before we go further, I've said the name MIDA a few times now, so let's give you a brief idea of who they are, because that's going to be really important to understanding the context of the ARG in itself. And also, I should probably point out who some of the other major players are in Marathon at the same time. To put it simply, MIDA is sort of a secret society, mixed with an insurgent group, mixed with a formerly legitimate political organization in the Sol system, though predominantly they were on Mars. The front they like to present is that of being able to fight for the rights and liberties of the people of the solar system, particularly those on Mars who have been forgotten by the people of Earth and the UESC. In fact, in the older lore of Marathon, MIDA was actually able to take over Mars for about 3 months or so. This so-called MIDA coup was brutal and cruel, but it was also short-lived, given the 3-month lifespan. In the end, it was put down by the UESC. Oh, and by the way, I know I've said that one a lot too. That stands for United Earth Space Council. I'll explain them in a second. All of this links in with the creation of the original Marathon as well. Yes, the one that the game is named after. The Marathon was basically a giant ship that was made out of Mars's entire moon, Deimos. It was supposed to be a colony ship that would go off to the distant planet of Tau Ceti, and a bunch of Mars's resources were siphoned off to make it, as well, of course, as one of their moons. They did sell the moon, but, well, they didn't exactly have the best of economic prospects when they did this. The reason for them selling it off was not so that they could get an extra buck or two when they were already prosperous. Mars was desperate and filled with poverty. As the Marathon was continually constructed overhead, it represented a symbol of oppression by the UESC against the Martian people, and so MIDA would begin to rise with its slow and steady plans being laid years out in advance. The UESC might rightly describe them as a terrorist organization, and given some of the illegal fictional hacking that the ARG players would conduct, they're not necessarily wrong about that. Of course, whether or not they're evil is a matter of perspective. Another note is that despite it being an acronym of something, nobody actually knows what MIDA stands for. It could be something that people commonly quote it to be, such as the Martian Interplanetary Defense Alliance. In the case of Destiny, where it kind of appears as a sort of Easter egg in the MIDA multi-tool and MIDA mini-tool, Commander Zavala, when examining the weapons, quips that MIDA might stand for Mars is damnably arid. Sorry, super quickly, turns out it wasn't Zavala, it was Shaxx. Getting back to the video though. It could also just be mass indifference destroys all, as was said by the We Are MIDA Twitter account during the first ARG. In fact, There were a lot of possibilities for what MITRE could stand for in that list of things, and I think my funniest interpretation of what it could be is simply multiple interpretations don't agree. Maybe I'll defer attributing it to anything for now. Anyway, MITRE's primary opponents within the solar system and in this ARG appear to be the major political and corporate powers of Sol. Principally, this includes the UESC, or United Earth Space Council, as I said earlier, which is the human government that extends into the solar system and beyond. It's kind of the human ruling council. It also includes the corporate entities of Traxxas and Sekiguchi. Traxxas is a leader in the fields of interplanetary infrastructure development projects, artificial intelligence, and intelligent machines. Sekiguchi, on the other hand, is responsible for cutting-edge genetic technologies and the creation of the most advanced artificial bodies, or biomatter, in the system. Essentially, MITRE in this instance is opposing the government, the largest interplanetary development agency in human space, bigger than SpaceX and Amazon put together, and Marathon's equivalent of the Tyrell Corporation, and it's doing this by opposing them all at once. Good strategy? Anyway, that's not important. What is important is your place in the ARG and what you would have been doing. Bringing us back to that, all the government and corporate entities were tightly wound in this interconnected web, and from their various communications, it appeared that MITRE was essentially trying to expose a secret that was being covered up by the UESC, and as agents, we were receiving communications from MITRE that were giving us hints that we needed to break into various UESC and Traxxas systems. Let's start with the UESC stuff because, I think it flows better. When reaching their main UESC site at uesc.io, it would boot momentarily before showing a pristine main menu and login window. However, the original Hear Our Silence page had given us hints within the browser tab, which scrolled through a bunch of text, including the phrase, "Rage is the key." Combining this with some chat logs that we found on the Traxxas website, we could see that by holding down the keys R, A, G, and E while booting the UESC site would allow MITRE agents, which is how I'm going to refer to the players from now on, to access the site's backend console commands. And inside these console commands, there were treasure troves of data. But there was also a decryption program that could be run. The symbols for the decryption program were not like normal alphabetical or numerical symbols. Instead, they were the ones that MITRE had sent us earlier on the Hear Our Silence login. Entering these symbols and decrypting the key correctly would lead to a whole new file within the terminal called farsight.7 with an enclosed sound bin. This was secret and couldn't be reached from any of the root menus that were otherwise available within the terminal. Sifting through the data, which was all tied into sounds and hex codes, would lead to a bunch of stuff, including the Ozymandias "Look upon my works, ye mighty and despair" poem, and also a bunch of codes that, when converted to hex, turned into a Discord server invite code. Yes, there was an entire Discord server dedicated to this, and as it turned out, this was another avenue by which the MITRE agent ARG players could interact with MITRE itself. There was a bot in the server called Null Transmitter, which appeared to require input. After several reboots and attempts by the MITRE agents, it was discovered that the poem they had decrypted earlier was the key. Entering every word of the Ozymandias poem into the bot would unlock more of its functions, including the ability for it to generate DAC, or digital access cards. These DACs are what led us to the Traxxas side of things. The UESC was apparently making use of Traxxas system satellite networks, which could be seen on the main Traxxas site at traxxas.global via the TraxSat Management Console node. In order to access this network and manipulate it from within, MITRE agents would need to enter their DACs until there were approximately 2,000 active users. After some time, when 2,000 active users were present, the satellite rings labeled Core, Transit, and Frontier could all be rotated collectively. Each user could rotate each ring plus or minus 1 degree, each with a 30-second cooldown per user. From here, MIDA agents would return to the original codes that the Twitch streamers had been helping to decrypt by getting more people to watch the ARG. These codes would then properly decrypt and would display a message. Plus 714, Frontier. Strange because that corresponded with one of the satellite rings on the global Traxxas satellite array, in particular the outermost ring. It was called Frontier. The Frontier ring would need to be aligned at plus 714 degrees, while the Transit and Core rings also needed to be aligned with it. When the community did this, they unlocked many other nodes of the Traxxas.global site. Most of them were adverts for various products that were being created by Traxxas, or in some cases, Sekiguchi. Or they were interfaces of some kind, displaying codes or some kind of AI companion. The thing that unified them was their barcodes on the left and right sides of their windows. Putting the two windows together would unify the barcodes and spit out a series of 3-digit transit codes. Eventually, it was discovered that by cross-referencing the tabs for 2 of the advert windows and the satellite call signs, there was a match. The 2 ads that had these matches spat out the code Transit plus 490. After aligning all of the satellites to Transit plus 490, the Discord server that had been giving out the DACs would update and a new classified intercepts folder was added. Within it, there was a message, and it was decoded, reading, "Override controls without leaving traces." As it so happened, 2 of the adverts on the Traxxas.global site had those exact words, and they could also, just like before, be combined so that their barcode windows would give a code when they lined up next to each other. That code was Transit -978. This was the second clue out of 3. The Frontier ring had an alignment. The Transit ring had an alignment. Now, aligning the satellite rings to this new transit code would lead to a new tweet from MIDA. Expect us, multi-chan signal inbound. After a certain amount of time and after a certain amount of hints, the We Are MIDA account would eventually tweet an image of the final solution to the satellite puzzle. An image that, when altered under exposure and various color grading in Photoshop, would read Core with a series of eyes. 8 eyes. 4 on the top row, 1 in the middle, 3 on the bottom. And with that, the 3 satellites had a position they could align to. Frontier plus 714, Transit plus 490, and Core minus 413. Each of these alignments represented the number of times someone had to click on Frontier, Transit, and Core satellite rings to move them into the correct position through the Traxxas site, and the numbers were all relative to their original position. For example, as a community, to get Core into the correct place, everyone had to hit minus a collective 413 times to align it to the proper location. Using all of their findings and with a few more hints, Milo, Scarrow, Bog, and almost 3,000 active MIDA agents were able to align the Traxxas satellite network correctly, and received a signal from what I presume was Tau Ceti. That signal is the official Save the Date trailer for Marathon. Take a look. So with all that in mind, let's do a quick breakdown of that trailer and talk about what we know thanks to the ARG. The images we're seeing are undoubtedly from the lush surface of Tau Ceti itself. The structures might be from the abandoned colony that was wiped out by the Marathon's alien antagonists, the Four. This, of course, was well after it was successfully defended in the first Marathon game by the 9 Battleroids on the surface. Unfortunately, even the 9 Battleroids weren't enough when the Four came back for vengeance. However, there are some signs of newer technologies and brands throughout the trailer. The presence of the new logo on many crates indicates that some of the supplies in the area are not from that old time. In particular, at 30 seconds in, you can see the branding of a crate that reads New Caloric, which is a brand of dystopian future foods and beverages made by Traxxas. Well before this, though, you can see that at 9 seconds into the trailer, there's something odd in the sky. It's just in front of the larger moon that we can see, and it looks like it could be a ship, but the actual degree to which it's identifiable is limited because of pixelation. Given the shape of it, though, with a large thin section at the front and a large spherical section in the rear, this could well be the Marathon itself. The thin metallic section is the artificial bit, and the spherical section is whatever remains of the moon of Deimos. The tranquil silence on Tau Ceti is of course broken by the presence of the runners, one of whom suffers a fatality. They fall and are left to die in the swampy terrain while their adversary gets away. The strange thing about this is that the blood they bleed is a deep blue. This appears to be a byproduct of the technology used by runners in-game, namely a series of Sekiguchi clones or biomata. These clones can be neurally interfaced with and controlled to allow for remote piloting by the runners, meaning that in these dangerous environments, death itself is not really an end. The blue blood is probably a consequence of this individual not being human, but rather a biomata, though we can't really confirm any of this at the moment. The beam of light shown off on the horizon is probably the runner that was successful in the conflict, teleporting to safety somewhere in orbit. Teleportation is a relatively old technology in the Marathon universe, with it having been developed hundreds of years before the late 29th century, when Marathon now takes place. The technology that is new, however, is the cat. This appears to be the first example in any trailer that we're seeing of what's known as the Sekiguchi patented Fido, or Fully Integrated Digital Organism. Fido is essentially a memory transfer technology that works as a body for a pet. The Fido system not only includes that memory transfer, but also an artificial body for your furry friend to live on, meaning that, as they would put it, fully intact memories of any type of four-legged friend can be preserved. In simpler terms, this is the memories of a once-living cat that were preserved digitally so that it could continue to live inside the Fido, the physical pink version of the cat. Whether the Fido is fully synthetic or whether it's closer to the biomata clones that the runners use isn't clear, but I'd bet that it is closer to the latter rather than the former. There's also a bunch of codes and text throughout the trailer, which I'm sure relates more to the puzzles of the ARG, which technically is still ongoing. More website parts and pieces have been unlocked, more puzzles have been discovered, and some of them have even been solved. For the moment, though, I want to focus on the broader story of the ARG and what Bungie was trying to tell through it, which I think relates back to the potential actions of Mida in the original Marathon game. This is just a theory, but hear me out. There are hints to the idea that Mida had infiltrated the Tau Ceti colonial efforts that were being undertaken by the Marathon. It's confirmed in the Mida mini-tool from Destiny 2 that the first science director of the Marathon, a man named Bernard Strauss, was a Mida member, and it's implied that both he and Mida were behind a plan that involved the Marathon. It also included 10 Mark IV cyborg Battleroids, which were covertly planted within the colonists bound for Tau Ceti on the Marathon. This was all conducted 300 years prior to the colony vessel's arrival, before the ship even launched. It is a long-seated plan. These Battleroids included the security officer that you play as in the events of the Marathon game. Essentially, the implication is that Mida planted you and the other 9 Battleroids on the Marathon covertly, and if that was the case, then we can probably assess what the Mida plan was in broad strokes. Stow away, reach Tau Ceti 4, and then, when the time was right, seize control of this new world with their superior forces. This is when timelines get very interesting, because the events of Marathon take place just under 100 years before the events of this new 21st century iteration of Marathon, which has events currently taking place around 2888 judging by the first Marathon ARG. Crucially, this puts the game at a time well after the events of Marathon and Marathon Durandal. Let's not talk about Marathon Infinity for now, though. I want to prevent my brain from swimming in poison. With that in mind, it's likely that Mida has known about the fate of Tau Ceti for some time by this point, and that they're looking for some kind of vengeance, or at very least to follow through on their original plan. This aligns generally with their goals of resisting the UESC, but it also acts as a sort of indication of their own thoughts on Tau Ceti. They were planning to potentially take over the colony, and in their eyes it might well be theirs, not the UESC's. If that's the case, they want to embroil the UESC in scandal by showing the state of the colony, exposing any secretive operations that might still be ongoing on the surface of Tau Ceti, and in the process, implicate Traxxas, Sekiguchi, and the UESC all at once. This could also be an attempt to control the narrative around Tau Ceti. After all, supposedly, the Mida plan involved the violent intervention of 10 merciless Battleroids to take over the colony. Something tells me that Mida is still trying to control that narrative, and that they're not necessarily happy with the idea that the truth might have been discovered by the UESC and then disclosed. And even if all the colonists are dead, there would be witnesses to this. The AIs that accompanied the Marathon and its crew. Now, the 3 shipboard AIs, Leela, Durandal, and Tycho, would all probably be out of the picture. I think there's a question mark as to what happened to Leela, but even so, it doesn't seem like she would have stuck around in the system. However, in the first ARG, it notes that the colony itself had 8 AIs stationed down planetside, and those AIs may well still be around. If that's the case, then, well, we have witnesses. And if that's the case, then they might well be able to tell everyone about Mida's plan, failed as it was. Mida feels like a savvy group that is more than capable of controlling the narrative, and it feels like this might well just be their intent, controlling the narrative so that their previous misdeeds 400 years ago don't get revealed. But that's just a guess. Let me know what you think down below in the comments section. And if there is anything you need to correct me on with regards to the storytelling of the ARG, please do so. The entire process of solving the ARG took place over 4 or 5 days. There's a lot of information that's out there, and some of it may well have missed my desk. If it did, feel free to go ahead and point out what was missed. And if there have been any other developments, go ahead and talk about them in the comments below as well. But in the meantime, I hope this recap was useful. And if you enjoy this and want more Marathon content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me. And in the meantime, my name is Bife. Por audacia ad astra. I'll see you starside.